This is Jonathan Cahn. Welcome to my YouTube channel. When you look at what's happening in the world, it's easy to wonder what's going on, and are things out of control? Is this what the Bible foretold? Is the end near? What do I need to know about the future? Where's it all going? How can I be prepared? What is God's prophetic word for the hour and for me? On this channel, you're going to find prophetic updates, the mysteries of God, daily words for life, biblical revelation, prophetic teachings, and much more. I pray it's going to be a great blessing to you in the days ahead. So be sure to hit the subscribe button and tap the bell icon so you're notified every time there's a new video that's posted. Leave a comment as to how God is blessing you. And don't forget to share these videos with friends who need to hear them. Thanks again, and God bless you. Shalom.
There are moments in time, moments appointed by the sovereign hand of God, when history turns, destinies shift, and everything begins to change. We are now standing on the edge of such a moment. August 8th, 2025 is not just another day on the calendar. It is a divine appointment, a prophetic threshold, a turning point decreed in the heavenly realms. And what you do as that day dawns will shape everything that follows. This is not coincidence. This is the voice of God calling, will you answer? There are days that come and go without leaving a trace, and then there are days that come like a storm, shifting the atmosphere, altering the course of destinies, and marking history with the fingerprints of God. August 8, 2025 is one such day. It is not a day to be overlooked or treated as ordinary. It is not just another Friday or another number on the calendar. It is a day stamped with divine purpose, a date that carries the weight of prophetic significance. When God marks a moment in time, that moment becomes a portal through which heaven invades earth. Every date has a destiny, and when God appoints a time, everything aligns to it: heaven, earth, circumstance, calling, and even conflict. In the same way that the children of Israel were not released from Egypt on a random day, but on the precise night of the Passover. After centuries of bondage, God works through appointed times to fulfill his purposes. The Passover wasn't just a historical event. It was a divine schedule unfolding right on time. God had told Abraham 400 years earlier that his descendants would be strangers in a land not their own, that he would bring them out in the fourth generation. And exactly when that prophetic clock struck its hour, God moved. August 8, 2025 may not yet be fully understood by human minds, but the Spirit is stirring and the heavens are aligning. It is as if creation itself is holding its breath, waiting for the people of God to recognize that time is not just a ticking of seconds. It is a sacred sequence where God hides purposes in dates, appointments, and seasons, and breakthroughs in moments that to the natural eye look no different than the rest. Consider the story of Esther, a Jewish girl hidden in a Persian palace, elevated to the throne at just the right time. The enemy had plotted the destruction of her people, and the decree of death had gone forth. But there was a date on heaven's calendar when deliverance would come. Mordecai's words to Esther thunder through history. Who knows but that you have come to the kingdom for such a time as this? Esther 4:1 and 4. Esther had to choose whether she would shrink back or step in. The destiny of a people hinged on her decision to recognize the divine timing and act in faith. She did not delay. She fasted. She prayed. She stepped into her calling, and everything changed. The decree was reversed. The plot of the enemy backfired. What had been designed for destruction became a platform for deliverance. God's timing is always perfect, but his purposes are activated by our obedience. August 8, 2025 is not about superstition or emotional hype. It's about holy alignment. It is a spiritual wake-up call to those who have been slumbering. For some, it will be a day of promotion. For others, a day of exposure. For the faithful, it will be a day of release. Doors that have remained locked for years will suddenly swing open, not because of human effort, but because the time appointed has come. God is not subject to man's calendar, but he does work in seasons, and those who discern the times will be prepared for the shift. To bring it into perspective, think of a real-life example. A woman who for years battled addiction, brokenness, and hopelessness. She had wandered from God, lost in cycles of self-destruction. But one day, on a date she didn't expect, she walked past a church. Something pulled her in. That day, without knowing why, she sat in the back of the sanctuary and wept through the entire service. It wasn't a holiday. It wasn't a revival meeting. It was just an ordinary Wednesday. But for her, it was her appointed time. The Spirit of God arrested her heart, and she surrendered her life. That woman today is a pastor, a mother, a voice of deliverance to the very kind of people she once was. What changed everything? Not the calendar, but the calling that collided with the timing of God. That moment, hidden in plain sight, was her divine appointment. In the same way, many will arrive at August 8, 2025 unaware that heaven has circled that day for breakthrough, transformation, and new beginnings. But for those who are sensitive to the Spirit, who have discerned the rumblings of God beneath the surface, That day will not pass unnoticed. It will become the moment everything changes. It's not that God can't move on other days. He is always at work, but there are windows in the Spirit when the heavens are open, when destinies accelerate, when long-delayed promises suddenly come into view. These are Kairos moments, God's divine appointments. You may have waited years for a change, prayed in silence, fasted in secret, and wondered if God still sees. But heaven is never late. And when the time comes, no demon in hell can stop what God has set in motion. August 8, 2025 is more than a date. It's a summons, a call to prepare, to listen, to align. It's a reminder that your life is not ruled by chance, but by purpose. And if you're willing to say yes, to step through the door when it opens, you will find that everything can change in a single day when God has spoken. Everything that can be shaken will be shaken, because God is not afraid to shake the foundations in order to expose what's real, remove what's false, and reveal what cannot be moved. When God begins to shake the world, it is not a sign of his absence, but of his presence, refining, correcting, realigning. Many look at the turbulence around them and ask, where is God? But the better question is, what is God doing in the midst of the shaking? The shaking is not punishment. It is preparation. It is heaven's way of saying, I am removing what was never meant to stand so that what is unshakable may remain. As August 8, 2025 draws near, we must understand that the shaking is not just coming, it's already begun. It's in the headlines, the economies, the systems of man. Institutions are crumbling. Truth is being traded for deception. The idols of culture are falling. Power, fame, wealth, control, none of them can withstand the weight of what is coming. But for those who are anchored in God, this shaking is not destruction, it's deliverance. In fact, many of the things shaking around us are answers to prayers we forgot we prayed. We asked God to purify the church, so he's exposing what was hidden. We asked him to use us for his glory, so he's stripping away every false identity. We asked him to make us unshakable, so he's allowing us to go through what forces us to dig deeper into him. Shaking is God's mercy disguised as disruption. It's the divine hand tearing down the structures we built without him. Just as Jesus overturned the tables in the temple, not out of rage, but out of holy love, so too is he overturning the temples of pride, compromise, and self-reliance in our lives. And while the shaking may seem chaotic, it is orchestrated with surgical precision. God never shakes without purpose. He shakes to awaken. He shakes to sift. He shakes to separate what is eternal from what is temporary. Think of a building being tested during an earthquake. The structures that were built according to code, on solid foundations with reinforced materials, may sway, but they do not fall. Meanwhile, those built hastily, without depth, or on unstable ground collapse at the first tremor. The same principle applies spiritually. When your life is built on Christ, you may feel the tremors, but you will not fall. But if your faith is in money, success, relationships, or reputation, the shaking will expose just how fragile that foundation truly is. Consider the parable Jesus told of the two men, one who built his house on the rock, the other on the sand. Both houses looked fine until the storm came. The storm revealed what the sun could not. The house built on sand collapsed, but the one built on the rock stood firm. That storm was a test, but it was also a revelation. And so it is today. God is allowing the winds to blow, not to destroy you, but to show you what you're really standing on. The shaking is the storm before the shift, the struggle before the surge, the fire before the fullness. It is the evidence that God is not finished and that he is making space for something new. In this hour, we must not fear the shaking. We must welcome it, because only what is truly of God will survive it. On August 8, 2025, many will look back and realize that the season of shaking was not their breaking point. It was their ours making point. It was the moment God removed every crutch and excuse, every compromise and comfort, and left them standing only on his word, his promise, and his presence. There's a powerful real life example of this kind of shaking. A man who once ran a multi-million-dollar business, known in his city, admired by many. His life looked perfect on the outside, but it was built on ego, ambition, and image. Then came the shaking, a sudden collapse in the market, a betrayal by a close friend, a lawsuit. In less than a year, he lost his company, his reputation, and almost lost his mind. But in that lowest place, something sacred happened. He fell to his knees in the middle of his empty office and cried out to God, not for money, but for mercy. And heaven answered. God didn't restore his old life. He gave him a new one. Today, that man leads a ministry to broken businessmen, helping them rebuild from the inside out. What looked like destruction was actually construction. The shaking wasn't the end, it was the beginning. God had to shake what was false so he could establish what was true. That story mirrors what happened in the book of Acts when Paul and Silas were locked in a prison cell. They didn't wait for deliverance to worship, they worshiped in the middle of the shaking. And as they praised, a literal earthquake came. But notice, God didn't shake the prison to punish them. He shook it to free them. The shaking broke chains. The shaking opened doors. The shaking didn't destroy, it delivered. And what followed was not just their freedom, but the salvation of the jailer and his entire household. That's what happens when God shakes a thing. It leads to a harvest, it brings revelation, it sets captives free. It redefines what victory looks like. On August 8, 2025, God is not bringing fear, He is releasing freedom. The shaking is the prelude to revival. It is the warning before the wonder, the sound before the surge. But only those who see with spiritual eyes will understand what's happening. The world will call it instability. Heaven calls it reformation. The enemy will say it's chaos. God says it's divine order being restored. So don't be afraid when the shaking intensifies. Stand firm. Don't retreat, compromise. Don't rebuild what God is tearing down. Let Him finish what He started. Let Him purify what has been polluted. Let Him remove what is standing in the way of what He's about to release. Because when the shaking stops, what remains will be holy. And what emerges from the rubble will be stronger, purer, and more aligned with heaven than anything we've seen before. This is not the end. It's the birthing of something new. And when August 8 arrives, many will realize that what they thought was falling apart was actually falling into place. Heaven has spoken, and the shaking is a sign. Yes, everything is about to change. As there are moments in life when everything around you seems uncertain. When the noise of the world tries to drown out the voice of God, but in the middle of that noise, something begins to stir in your spirit, something deep and unshakable that whispers, this is the moment things align. That stirring is not just emotion alignment, it's heaven pulling your life into place with divine precision. August 8th. 2025 is one such moment, not a random date, but a prophetic convergence, a spiritual alignment between God's timing and your calling. When divine alignment is released, everything shifts, not because your circumstances have changed, but because you have stepped into the right position for heaven's purposes to be fulfilled. Think of it like a key turning in a lock. The door may have been closed for years, but it wasn't because the door was broken. It was because the timing wasn't right. But when the right key, your obedience, your surrender, your faith, meets the right moment, the impossible becomes possible. Suddenly, prayers you've long forgotten begin to stir. Dreams that had gathered dust begin to come alive, and promises that seemed delayed begin to accelerate. When God aligns your life, it's not always comfortable, but it's always transformational. Divine alignment is not about everything going the way you want. It's about everything moving into the position God has ordained. And sometimes the shift starts with disruption, a closed door, a detour, a sudden loss, a strange delay. But in God's kingdom, what looks like a setback is often a setup. Consider Joseph, betrayed by his brothers, sold into slavery, falsely accused, thrown into prison. Nothing looked aligned. Yet through every painful step, God was aligning Joseph for something greater than he could imagine. One divine moment, Pharaoh's dream, shifted everything. Overnight, Joseph went from prisoner to prime minister. But it wasn't overnight in heaven's eyes, it was appointed. Every trial, every delay, every tear had been working in the background to position Joseph for the exact moment when his purpose would collide with his preparation. That's alignment. We live in a culture obsessed with speed, but God is a God of His timing. He doesn't just want to bless you, He wants to bless you when you're ready to carry the weight of the blessing. Divine alignment requires waiting, trusting, letting go of your own deadlines and submitting to God's timeline. And when that alignment comes, everything begins to make sense in a way that human logic cannot explain. You begin to see why certain people left, why certain doors didn't open, why certain prayers weren't answered the way you wanted. Because had they been, you would have missed the bigger plan. Alignment brings perspective. Alignment brings clarity. Alignment brings acceleration. There's a real life story of a woman who had worked faithfully for nearly 2 decades in a position where her gifts were overlooked. She served with excellence, but promotion never came. She prayed, fasted, sowed, and waited. But nothing moved. Friends told her to quit, find something better. But every time she considered it, she felt the Lord say, stay. I'm working behind the scenes. Then one day, on a date she hadn't circled, without warning, the company's senior leadership unexpectedly resigned due to ethical failures. The board, looking for someone with character and consistency, bypassed outside candidates and turned to her. Overnight, she was promoted into the very position she had dreamed of, but it wasn't just a career move. It was a divine placement. Her role now influences policy, culture, and ministry within a secular institution. God didn't just give her a job, He gave her a platform. That's what alignment does. It takes your faithfulness in the unseen and brings it into visibility when the moment is right. The Bible is filled with such moments of alignment, when the invisible hand of God moves people, events, and even nations into divine position. One of the most powerful examples is in the story of Ruth. A widow, a foreigner, poor and vulnerable. Ruth chose loyalty and faith over comfort and convenience. She followed Naomi, not knowing what lay ahead. She gleaned in fields just to survive. But God was aligning her. Her steps, her choices, even her sorrow were weaving her into a lineage of destiny. She didn't know that Boaz owned the field. She didn't know that her humble obedience would position her to become the great grandmother of King David and enter the lineage of the Messiah. But God did. Ruth didn't need to manipulate, push, or chase opportunity. She needed to walk in faith and trust that alignment would come. And it did, right on time. That's the beauty of divine alignment. It doesn't depend on your strength, your RA, summe, or your connections. It depends on your posture. Are you positioned to hear, move to obey? August 8, 2025 is not about forcing a breakthrough. It's about being found ready when the breakthrough arrives. It's about walking in such close step with the Spirit that when God says move, you don't hesitate. Alignment is about posture more than performance. Many people spend years asking God for the next thing when what they really need is the right thing at the right time. Divine alignment means God is not only releasing what belongs to you, but removing what no longer fits you. He's stripping away relationships, opportunities, and even identities that served a season but cannot carry the next. And yes, that pruning can feel painful. But what if that pain is part of the preparation? What if the empty space is where the new thing begins? God never aligns you with destiny without first unrooting you from everything false. That's why so many feel stretched, pressed, and even misunderstood right now. It's the tension of transition. It's the pulling of the Spirit as He adjusts you to fit the shape of what's coming. When a bow is drawn back, it looks like retreat, but in truth, it's preparing for acceleration. The further the draw, the greater the release. In the same way, the pressure you feel is not a sign that you're off course. It may be the clearest sign that you're being aligned for impact. Heaven is drawing the bow. On August 8th, the arrow flies, and those who have yielded to the preparation will see doors open that no man can shut, appointments they never planned, and provision that chases them down. So lift your eyes. Look past the chaos, the questions, and the delays. There is order in the shaking. There is purpose in the stillness. You are not behind. You are right on schedule. Heaven has been aligning everything around you for such a time as this. August 8th, 2025 is not the beginning of your calling, it's the revealing of it. What was once hidden will be unveiled. What was once resisted will now be released. The season of obscurity has not been a waste, it has been your preparation for divine alignment. And when alignment comes, everything changes, not gradually, not someday, but suddenly. Get ready, get in position. Stay faithful. Because what God is aligning in this hour is not just your blessing, it's yours assignment. And when the time comes, it will not delay. Heaven's calendar has marked the day. As everything changes, say there comes a moment in every life when the still small voice within begins to rise like a roar and something undeniable awakens deep in the soul. A realization that you were not created to merely exist, survive, or drift through life unnoticed, but to rise to war, to run your race with fire in your bones and purpose in your steps. You were born for this hour, not another century, not another city, not another name you. Right now, right here. On the edge of August 8, 2025, that truth comes into sharper focus. This moment in history isn't random, and neither is your presence in it. Before you were formed in the womb, God appointed you, not just to attend church, but to shake kingdoms. Not just to raise a family, but to raise the standard. Not just to endure the chaos of the world, but to stand against it like a lighthouse in the storm. This hour demands more than passivity or comfort. It demands conviction, courage, and an unrelenting pursuit of the kingdom. All around us, darkness is gaining ground in culture, media, government, and even in hearts that once burned with holy fire. But in the midst of that darkness, God is raising up voices, watchmen, warriors, not the famous or the flawless, but the willing, the available, the surrendered. You were born for this hour, and heaven is calling you to wake up, rise up, and step into the authority already written over your life. You may not feel ready. You may see your weakness, but God sees your obedience, and He never calls the qualified. He qualifies the called. Consider Gideon hiding in fear, threshing wheat in a winepress, completely convinced he was insignificant, unworthy, and unequipped. But God saw a warrior. God saw a deliverer. And when the angel of the Lord appeared, He didn't address Gideon's insecurity. He declared his identity. The Lord is with you, mighty man of valor. Gideon argued, as many of us do. My clan is the weakest. I am the least. But God didn't back off, because God doesn't speak to who you think you are. He speaks to who He made you to be. And when Gideon finally believed, stepped out, and obeyed, even with trembling hands, he led a 300-man army to overthrow an enemy that outnumbered them beyond reason. That is the power of stepping into your appointed hour. You don't need the approval of the crowd. You don't need all the answers. You need a word from God and the faith to act on it. When you do, the power of heaven backs you, the strategy of the Spirit leads you, and the fear that once chained you begins to fall away. The same pattern has repeated through history. God chooses the least expected to do the most extraordinary. Think of David, the forgotten shepherd boy Esther, the orphan turned queen Mary, the young virgin entrusted with the Savior of the world. None of them were ready in the eyes of man, but all of them were ready in the eyes of God. And all of them said yes to the call. They didn't wait for ideal circumstances. They walked into impossible ones. And because they stepped forward, everything changed for those around them. That same invitation is extended to you now. August 8, 2025 is not just a prophetic date. It is a divine summons to everyone who has wondered why they've been fought so hard, why the warfare has been so intense, why the resistance seems endless. The answer is simple because of what you carry. The enemy doesn't attack empty vessels. He attacks those who are pregnant with purpose, those whose obedience threatens the darkness, those whose very presence in a room shifts the atmosphere. If you've been through the fire, it's because there's gold in you. If you felt the crushing, it's because oil is being pressed out of you. This is not the time to shrink back. This is not the time to apologize for your anointing. This is the time to rise, not in your own strength, but clothed in power from on high. You were born for this. Every tear, every delay, every betrayal, every lesson. It was all part of your preparation. And though the enemy tried to bury you in silence, disappointment, or fear, heaven has preserved you for such a time as this. A woman I once heard speak shared how, after surviving abuse, addiction, and homelessness, she found herself serving in a recovery center. She had nothing but a heart surrendered to God. One day she prayed with a young woman on the verge of suicide. That prayer changed everything. The girl lived, recovered, and now runs her own outreach program. Years later, that woman said, "I didn't know God could use someone like me. But I realized the pain I lived through was the weapon He placed in my hand." That's it. Your scars are not shameful. They're sacred. They're proof that you survived, and that survival is the seed of someone else's breakthrough. On August 8, 2025, many will step out of the shadows, no longer hidden, no longer silenced by fear or the opinions of others. Many will be thrust forward into positions they didn't seek, but were born to fill. For those who have been faithful in the secret place, heaven is about to make it public. But it's not for fame, it's for impact. The world is not waiting for another influencer, it's waiting for someone on fire. Someone who still believes God raises the dead, heals the sick, breaks generational curses, and calls ordinary people to do extraordinary things. You don't need a microphone to be dangerous to hell. You need fire in your belly, truth in your mouth, and the boldness to speak when everyone else is silent. The church doesn't need more spectators, it needs soldiers. And your enlistment is now. This is not about striving, it's about surrender. Not about perfection, but permission. Giving God full access to every part of your life and saying, use it all. You don't need to wait until you feel ready. The moment you say yes, heaven moves, and when God moves, things shift quickly. Alignments are formed, doors open, grace multiplies. August 8, 2025 will be a defining line in the sand before and after. And those who rise will not rise in pride, but in purpose. They will be the unexpected, the overlooked, the underestimated, and they will be carriers of glory. So if you've been wondering why you were born, why your story has been so hard, why you couldn't quit even when you tried, it's because there's a fire inside you that hell couldn't extinguish. That fire is your assignment. That burden is your calling. And the time to walk in it is now. You are not too late. You have not missed it. You are not too broken, too flawed, too far gone. You are exactly where God can use you most, on your knees, with your heart open and your spirit willing. The stage has been set. The heavens are watching. The earth is groaning. And the Spirit is moving. Will you answer the call? Will you say yes, not just in word, but in action? Will you rise when others sit, speak when others are silent, believe when others doubt, because you were born for this hour? Not next year, not someday now. On August 8, 2025, everything changes, not because the world demands it, but because heaven decrees it. And when God calls, only one response echoes into eternity. Here I am, Lord, send me. There are moments in life when it feels like all hell is broken loose, when the weight is too heavy, the loss too deep, and the silence of God feels deafening. And in those moments, it's tempting to believe the enemy is winning. But what if the very battle that threatens to destroy you is the proof that heaven is about to deliver you? What if the enemy's attack is not a sign of your defeat, but a signal of your destiny? You must understand when the enemy targets you, it's not because you're weak, it's because you're dangerous to his kingdom. And when God says, everything changes, he's not speaking into perfect conditions, he's speaking into the storm. On August 8, 2025, that prophetic moment will not be marked by ease or calm, but by divine turnaround. What the enemy meant for evil, God will turn for good, not in theory, but in tangible, visible, undeniable ways. Just like Joseph, who was betrayed, sold, slandered, and forgotten. Every arrow aimed to destroy him became a building block for the throne he would one day occupy. When his brothers came trembling before him, expecting revenge, Joseph didn't speak from bitterness. he spoke from vision. You meant evil against me, he said, but God meant it for good, to save many lives. That is the mystery of God's sovereignty. He doesn't just stop evil, he repurposes it. He doesn't just rescue you, he elevates you through the very fire meant to consume you. Your story may be filled with betrayal, heartbreak, sickness, or loss. But the ink isn't dry. God is still writing, and the next chapter is called redemption. Think of a young man who grew up in a violent, gang-ridden neighborhood. His father abandoned the family. His mother worked multiple jobs just to put food on the table. At 15, he was pulled into the streets, consumed by drugs, crime, and rage. Everyone around him believed he'd either be dead or in prison by 21. And they weren't wrong. By 18, he was behind bars facing years. But one night in a cold, dark cell, he heard the voice of a prison chaplain who came weekly to speak about Jesus. He didn't listen at first, but this time, something pierced him. He fell to his knees in tears and cried out, God, if you're real, save me. That night, everything began to change. Slowly, painfully, but surely, he gave his life to Christ, studied the Word, earned his GED, and even began preaching to other inmates. When he was finally released, he didn't go back to the streets, he went into ministry. Today, that man leads one of the most powerful inner city youth outreaches in the country. His life is a walking testimony that the devil's plan didn't win. That's what it looks like when God turns evil into good, not just to save one life, but to save many. The enemy had a plan, but God had a greater one. The same is true for you. What felt like the end may have been the beginning of something bigger than you imagined. In Scripture, time and time again, we see this divine reversal. The impossible turned possible, the hopeless turned hopeful. Think of Haman in the book of Esther. He plotted genocide against the Jews, constructed gallows to hang Mordecai, and manipulated the king into issuing a death decree. But in a divine twist, the very gallows Haman built for Mordecai became the instrument of his own destruction, and the decree meant to kill God's people was overturned. Not only were the Jews saved, they were honored. Mordecai was clothed in royal robes. Esther's courage shifted a kingdom. This wasn't poetic justice, it was divine justice. God is not only the author of salvation, he is the master of reversal. He specializes in flipping the script in ways that no man can take credit for. That's what he's preparing to do in your life. The enemy has built gallows. He's written decrees. He's stirred up confusion, division, loss, and delay. But heaven has a counter order, and it will arrive right on time. August 8, 2025 is not just a date. It is a courtroom moment in the spirit when God says, hey, enough. What was meant to bury you will elevate you. What was sent to silence you will become your platform. And what once looked like death will become the door to resurrection. You see, when Jesus was crucified, the enemy believed he had won. The cross looked like defeat. The tomb looked like the end. The silence of Saturday was deafening. But Sunday came. Resurrection came. Glory came. And the very thing the devil used to try and end Jesus became the very means by which salvation was released to the world. The cross didn't stop the plan of God. It fulfilled it. In the same way, don't misinterpret your cross. Don't misread your Saturday silence. Resurrection is coming. God wastes nothing. Even your mistakes, your pain, your failures, when surrendered, become fuel for your calling. What was meant for evil becomes evidence of his goodness. You may not see the full picture yet, but August 8, 2025 is not waiting for you to understand. It's waiting for you to believe. To believe that God is still on the throne. To believe that your pain has purpose. To believe that heaven is about to vindicate what hell tried to destroy. And to believe that when God says everything changes, he means everything. So do not give in to despair. Do not allow bitterness to settle into your heart. Do not hand the pen of your life over to the enemy. God is not finished. In fact, the most painful chapters often precede the most powerful ones. That addiction you overcame, that loss you endured, that season that almost broke you, they are not disqualifiers. They are credentials. They are the very places where heaven's power will be made visible. And when the shift comes, people won't just see what God did there for you. They'll see what he did through you. You will be a sign and a wonder. A living testimony that God turns graves into gardens, mourning into dancing, and ashes into beauty. The enemy will regret the day he ever touched your life, because everything he meant for evil will now work to glorify God. The chains he used to bind you will become the keys you use to set others free, and the pain you endured will become the oil that anoints others for victory. On August 8, 2025, many will wake up feeling like it's just another day. But for those who have walked through the fire, endured the shaking, and held on when everything said quit, this will be a day of divine reversal, a day when tears turn into triumph, a day when what was hidden is revealed, a day when the plans of the enemy are overturned by the voice of God. This is not hype. This is not fantasy. This is the unshakable truth of a sovereign God who always gets the final word, and when he speaks, everything must bow. So rise up, shake off the dust, lift your eyes. Heaven has decreed it. What the enemy meant for evil, God will turn for good. It's not a question. It's a promise, and it's coming soon. August 8, 2025 will not pass like any other day. It will come as a whisper, a trumpet blast, a wind from heaven. Those who are awake will hear it. Those who are ready will receive it, and those who respond will walk into a future unlike anything they've imagined. The moment is now. Heaven has spoken. Everything changes.